Have you ever played WTF Sudoku?
You mean WTF as in what the f?
Yes.
What the f is so all fired? What the f about Sudoku?
Regular Sudoku is played on a 9x9 grid with exactly one of every digit 1 through 9 in every row, column, and 3x3 grid.
So what?
WTF Sudoku is played on a 25x25 grid with exactly one of every letter A through Y in every row, column, and 5x5 group.
WTF. How can I play WTF Sudoku?
You can play it online at www.cybermansoftware.com/games. You can also buy a book of puzzles on Amazon.com. Just search for WTF Sudoku.
Book? You mean on paper?
Yes, that's correct.
So that's www.cybermansoftware.com/games or by searching for WTF Sudoku on Amazon.com?
Yes.
Welcome to Freedom Rocks. I'm Max Kessler. This week our guest is Dr. Mark Glogowski, author of The Political Primer. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Max. It's a pleasure to be here.
What would you like to start by saying about The Political Primer?
Well, I'd like to start by at least giving the audience a little idea of why I wrote it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
I have been involved in politics way back in the early 1980s, became a town leader for the Republican Party, and then dropped out of politics for a while. And in 1996, when I retired from Kodak, I decided I wanted to get back in politics again. I just said the most logical place to do this would be at the town committee, because that's where I had left off. And when I got there, I found that they had nominated a Democrat as their candidate. And this guy, very nice fellow, I've known him pretty much since the time I arrived in Hamlin as a new resident. And but he was definitely a Democrat. He got accolades for his writings from the Democratic Party. And he would never represent Republicans, and some of the programs he was proposing was just, just rattled my nerves a little bit, because he was advocating more and more government control over people's lives. So I decided that I was going to find someone to primary him. And I asked everybody on the committee, and I called people that had been involved in the past, and nobody would do it. Now, this was a good guy. He's been very active. He deserved a chance. So I thought, well, I'll primary him. And I went door to door, pretty much hit every single Republican door in the town. And I kept getting this response that, well, all politicians are the same and all the parties are the same, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah, and so I thought, well, I lost the primary by 75 votes. But it bothered me that the response I got...
75 out of how many total?
Almost 2,000.
Okay.
So, but it bothered me that I kept hitting apathy within the party and amongst the voters, and this very non-committal attitude about politics, that it doesn't really matter, that because the politicians are all the same. And so... Unfortunately,
it's not, it may technically be false, but well, not that much of a stretch.
It's not that much of a stretch, and that's part of the problem in society today, is that politicians don't distinguish themselves very well between parties, and it's very difficult for the average person to understand what the differences are. And so for the next 5 or 6 years, this bothered me, and I decided finally to take a very research approach to the problem and figure out how to get people within a matter of 2 minutes on the doorstep. That's all you have. How in 2 minutes do you get them to understand what they believe and why they believe it, and then relate that to the candidates? And after a while, I thought I came up with a solution. So I ended up giving some political primer courses at the continuing education for high schools around the area. And everyone kept telling me that I really need to write this up. And what finally convinced me was this one class, a 78-year-old fellow came in, very jovial. He sat down in class. About 15 minutes into the class, he just went, and I'm thinking, what did I just say?
Try not to fold your arms with the mic.
Oh, okay.
It tends to make a lot of noise.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so anyway, he folded his arms and had this scowl on his face, and he kept that look throughout the rest of the class, an hour and 15 minutes. When the class was over, he left, or the class left, and he came up to me with a big smile on his face and thanked me for the class and told me how much he enjoyed it. And I was scratching my head thinking, well, wait a minute. You didn't look like you enjoyed it. I apologize for whatever I said to get you upset. He says, I wasn't upset. I was thinking about my life. I says, well, what do you mean? He says, I've been involved in politics since I was 18. I've been a committee member since I was 21. I have perfect attendance. I have never missed a committee meeting to this day. But what bothers me is that every time we had a discussion about some hot topic, some issue where there's a problem, I could never get anyone on the committee to agree with me, and I could never figure out why. He says, I took your class, I finally figured out why. I says, well, what did you find out? What did you figure out? He said, I realize now I'm in the wrong party. So with that was pretty much cinched the fact that maybe I should write this down. If I can convince somebody that's been a party member for 51 years, 51 years, that he should be, I think I did the math wrong there, but somebody will figure it out, that he's in the wrong party, but he's dedicated to the party that he was in, then maybe I do have something that's new and unique and should get out there. So I started investigating a little further. And then I realized that all of politics boils down to just two concepts. And everyone uses those concepts every day. They walk down the street, they see someone coming toward them. The two things they always do, the first thing they always do is they make an assessment. Is this person good or evil? I mean, are they in harm's way here? Should they take cover and protect themselves? The other thing they always do if there is an interaction is that in the back of their minds they have already decided who's going to make the decisions that they're going to accept. Those two concepts, one of expectation of good or evil and the other concept of who's going to make the decisions, translate into the two fundamental concepts of politics. The first one is referred to as direction, and everybody hears politicians talk about this bill is going in the wrong direction. Bill Clinton probably vetoed more bills than any other president up to his time. And every time he vetoed it, he always said, this bill is going in the wrong direction. Newt Gingrich kept saying, we want to take the country in a new direction, and I'd be willing to bet that the majority of the people out there can't describe or define what direction means. Well, what it boils down to is when you write a bill, the first thing you have to do, and when you come up with a solution, the first thing you have to do to come up with the solution is decide who's going to make the decisions. And in politics, the question is, does the government make the decisions or do you make the decisions? And for people going up onto the doorstep, the fastest way to get that concept across is to ask the person, who is ultimately responsible for your welfare? Because the answer to that question will split a Democrat from a Republican every time. Now there are, I shouldn't say every time because there are exceptions, and I'll explain that in a minute. But the majority of the Republicans will agree that the individual is responsible for themselves, and the majority of the Democrats will agree that the government is responsible for the welfare of the individual. That is what they refer to as direction. And all you have to do is look at some big issue bill like Obamacare and ask yourself...
Well, Obamacare is a big subject, and we're coming up on a break. We'll be right back.
Did you know Freedom Rocks has swag? You can help stimulate the economy and show how much you like Freedom Rocks at the same time. We've got t-shirts for men and women. We've got coffee mugs and beer steins. We've got food and beverage thermoses. You can get your own Freedom Rocks swag with the show logo, as seen in the opening title of the show, right here at our Cafe Press shop. That's cafepress.com/freedomrocks.
Welcome back to Freedom Rocks. Again, we're interviewing Dr. Mark Legowski, author of The Political Primer. and you were just about to delve into the monstrosity of Obamacare.
Yes, I wanted to talk about Obamacare from the point of view of direction. If you ask people what they like about Obamacare, it's because government's basically making the decisions and giving everyone choices. And if you ask people what they don't like about Obamacare, it's that the government is making all the decisions and only giving you choices. You're not making decisions. And so that is the direction. The Obamacare for the Republicans went in the wrong direction. People should be making their own decisions right from scratch, and there should be a lot of options out there in terms of private enterprising offering what they would like to see the people decide about. And Obamacare went in the other direction. So direction is important, but the other aspect of politics is approach. And when you see someone coming at you, you make a decision on the average of whether that's a good person or a bad person, and you adjust your conduct accordingly. And you do that every time. Sometimes you just back away because you don't recognize the customs. This is the biggest problem between races. They have different customs, and those customs represent a situation that they don't know how to respond properly to. So there's fear generated. And whenever there's fear generated, you want somebody to come in and take over. So what happens in politics and in government is that you have an approach to writing a bill. And the approach is either going to be you're going to confine the evil people, or you're going to empower the good people.
Okay.
So you can't write a bill that does both. They've tried it in the past, and it really doesn't work well. It becomes very confusing, and the lawyers have a field day with this because then they can argue either way.
On the other hand, most of the politicians' friends are lawyers anyway. So
which is why politics is the way it is, I think.
So they write the bills for their friends to profit.
Right. But when you're a voter and you go into the voting booth, basically what you're doing is you're standing up to say, I would like our government and our society to be this way. And it's a matter of a direction and approach. And what I've realized when I was writing the book and trying to come up with examples, it finally dawned on me that direction and approach actually produce 4 political philosophies.
Okay.
And direction and approach, when actually work out on an individual level in terms of their worldview.
Okay.
And whenever somebody says, that's not right, that just should not be, about any issue that's out there, they're using their worldview to make that decision. Now, they may not be able to express their worldview, which is why most people don't know what they believe, but their worldview will probably never change. Everybody, when they were growing up, developed a worldview of how the world should be. And they use that worldview every time to make a decision as to whether something is right or wrong. And it has nothing to do with reality. You use reality, your vision of reality, and probably one of the best sources to understand what reality really is a book that's titled I'm Okay, You're Okay, by Thomas Harris. He's an MD that basically said there's 4 different realities that people develop. One is what they view themselves to be perfectly good at making decisions, and they view other people as being able to make very good decisions also. So I'm okay and you're okay. But there's other people that say, no, every time I made a decision it was wrong, catastrophes happen, I'm not okay at making decisions. I want other people to make decisions. They make good decisions and I like them. So I'm not okay, but you're okay. But then there's other people that say, no, I'm perfectly satisfied at making my own decisions, but I don't want you ever to make a decision again because I'm okay and you're not okay. And then you have the third reality where people basically have never liked what other decisions other people made, and they have never made a decision that other people liked. So they're not okay and you're not okay. Those are actually the problem people, because in reality, what will happen with these people is they will try to make decisions, and then because they know they can't make good decisions, they'll just stack all the deck of cards in their favor, and who cares about the rest of the world? They actually become the criminal element. So understanding that there's a reality out there, and that there's a worldview in terms of what should be, that political gap between the reality and the worldview is what actually drives people into politics. And so one of what I realized as I'm writing this is that these are pretty fundamental concepts of the worldview, the direction and approach. And what you'll find if you look at something that you say is wrong, and you analyze it from both who is making the decisions and how are they treating the people when they make the decisions. One or the other or both are wrong when you say something is wrong. Either it's gone in the wrong direction, or it's taken the wrong approach, or it's doing both. And when you turn to politics then, what happens is the individual should be aligning themselves with people that share their worldview. Because it's the worldview that creates the structure of society, the worldview of the person that you put into power. And your job as a voter is to find people that share your worldview so that you can put them into power, because they will always make a decision that you like. When you put people into power that don't share your worldview, you will not like most of their decisions, and they will build a society that you do not want to live in. So,
okay, now when you talk about making the good decisions versus making bad decisions, are you talking about morally as far as what harms other people, or as far as things like, I used the best information available to invest in Facebook on day one and then it tanked?
The moral issue does fall out of the political philosophies. I don't cover it in the book. If I write another book, I will, because it's a crucial element.
When you're talking about folks making bad decisions, are you talking about decisions to harm other people, or decisions that just, for whatever reason, don't work out?
Well, bad decisions can be twofold. I mean, there's the reality of is it a practical decision in terms of what happens in reality when you make that decision. And the consequences could be dire, and depending upon how you are impacted by the consequences of the decision, either it was a good decision or a bad decision. But on the other side, if you want to do the right thing and create a world that you want to live in, you have to make decisions based on your worldview. And so there is a good decision, a bad decision really isn't in play in politics. It's really, politics is concerned with whether you're making the right or wrong decision based upon your worldview, or you're making a practical decision based upon economics.
Okay. Coming up on another break. We'll be right back.
Did you know high-quality versions of all episodes of Freedom Rocks are available on DVD? Each DVD contains 3 episodes for just $15. We also have specials that aren't on RCTV or YouTube. You can find links to all of our DVDs on the Freedom Rocks website, freedomrocks.cybermansoftware.com.
Welcome back to Freedom Rocks. As always, I'd like to remind you that this is a cable access show. That means we don't get Nielsen ratings. So we don't know you're watching unless you tell us you're watching, which you can do by visiting this website right here at the bottom of your screen, Freedom Rocks, that's freedomrocks.cybermansoftware.com. Once again, we're speaking with Dr. Mark Legowski, author of The Political Primer. You were saying before the break?
Well, what I was saying before the break was we were talking about the good decisions versus bad decisions. What I like to do is take the conversation to a little bit of a different tack, so people get a feel for what's in the book and why it pertains to them.
So you want to take the 4 different worldviews and map them out to specific political parties?
Well, I do that in the book, and I will do that. But before I get to that, what I first like to do is to point out to the audience that politics concerns itself with interactions. I mean, interactions between you and I, interactions between us and the government, and interactions between governments. That's what it concerns itself about. But that is not what politics is about. Politics is about the individual and what the individual believes should be. And so the whole point of the book is to get people to understand what they believe should be. And that falls out into the worldviews. And now I'd like to go back to what your approach is. Those two concepts of direction and approach do fall out into 4 different political philosophies. And I relate those in terms of Democrat and Republican, and then a conservative and liberal approach to both sides. And what I like to do is just give you some examples of a conservative and a liberal Democrat and a conservative and liberal Republican, so people understand very clearly how these 4 political philosophies break down. We currently have a political structure in society where there are 4 political parties that have each individually embraced wholeheartedly one of those philosophies. And their goal now is to drive society into one of those structures. So we have, on the Democrat side, we have the direction being the government makes the decisions. And the conservative Democrats are actually the party for them is the Reform Party. If you read their bylaws, it is set up so that government has a responsibility to make the decisions, and it has to implement solutions to society's problems, whether the people want them or not. And you'll hear Reform Party vice presidential candidates, I don't know if they're going to have one this year or ever again, but the Reform Party vice presidential candidates come out and actually use those words. And when it's said emotionally with conviction, it's a very powerful message, and you tend to agree with them. The Democrats, the liberal Democrats, believe people are basically good, but government should still be making the decisions. And so what they tend to do is to break society into little groups. And each group now is going to have a solution specifically designed for it. And so it sort of explains 2 things about the Democrats. One, how they view people as being basically good, and yet they're still dictating to them what they're going to be doing, and why the Democrats are always splitting the society into factions. I mean, they must love Columbine. I mean, that school has over 200 different groups over there when the tragedy happened. And it was kind of amazing that they all stood out in the parking lot at night waving candles back and forth, and in unison started saying, "We are Columbine." But then when school started up again, they had about 215 or 220 different groups. You can't have this sense of unity when you have such diversity being emphasized. At least that's my opinion. But the Democrat philosophy is each group should have their own option, but the government's going to give them those choices.
Okay, and the Republican
And the Republican side, the conservative Republicans basically believe people are basically evil. They love zoning codes. I don't know of any conservative Republican that would ever get rid of a zoning code. The biggest regulatory agencies in the world have been created by conservative Republicans. Homeland Security, an organization so big that the Coast Guard got absorbed into it, and yet it represents only 7% of the Coast Guard. And the Coast Guard was the largest agency prior to that. Conservative Republicans, the TSA, the agency that publicly gropes people and virtually strips every man, woman, and child going onto an airplane. And then for their safety and security, will this plane load of unarmed people, if it is hijacked, rest assured they'll shoot it down for you. So conservative Republicans have no problem with TSA or zoning codes or any kind of intrusion by Homeland Security. People are basically evil. You have to contain them. The liberal Republicans, basically represented by the Libertarian Party, they believe that people are basically good, you should empower them, and that they're responsible for themselves. That philosophy is actually the philosophy that the U.S. Constitution was patterned after, which is why they thought it probably would not, this country probably would not survive in that form, because it requires men of goodwill to step up and do the right thing, not the practical thing. We have a group of politicians out there that are trying to do the practical thing, the financial thing. realistically, if you're going down the wrong track, who cares if...
1 minute.
Okay.
Well, go ahead.
Okay.
Just 1 minute left.
Okay. Well, who cares whether or not you're going down whether or not going down the wrong track is economically viable if it's the wrong track?
Okay. So, looks like we may wind up doing a second episode after all. This is a very interesting subject, very interesting book. Do you want to, now just before we break, you said men of goodwill. You mean that in a gender neutral?
A gender neutral, yes. I'm of the firm belief that we have terms out there that connote power to people, like chairman. And if some woman wants to take the position of chairman, she should take the title too, because it goes with power, because chairwoman or chairwoman means you've already made a concession because she's a woman, and therefore she's lost some power. And if she's a chair, she becomes an inanimate object.
Okay.
So I'm a firm advocate for Madam Chairman.
Now we absolutely have to wrap up. You're watching Freedom Rocks. The book is Political Primer.
As you may have noticed, you can watch Freedom Rocks for free on RCTV or on YouTube, but it takes money to produce good quality TV shows. You can support Freedom Rocks by shopping at our Cafe Press shop. There you can find t-shirts for men and women, tote and gym bags, coffee mugs, beer steins, food and beverage thermoses, and a bunch of other items Cafe Press offers. You can find our shop at cafepress.com/freedomrocks, all lowercase and no apostrophe.